What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. Every CEO listening and every CEO I know wants top performing sellers. Yeah, right? They want to have a whole team of top performing sellers. And some of them are lucky enough to have one or two, and the rest of the team is definitely lagging behind. The question really becomes, is it possible to have these top performing sellers, the ones who are meeting or exceeding their quota and delighting customers? Is it actually possible? Could you have a whole team of them? Well, there are some people out there who believe you can. And my guest today, after spending 20 years in technology sales, everything from startups to big companies like Salesforce, she was always in an enterprise sales, not by choice, but somehow got thrown into it. So her motto became, I will provide white glove service and exceed expectations. And because of that, she was one of those top performing sellers that everybody wants. And in fact, at one of the companies she worked for, she was given a framework and she made it her own such that she was able to, in an environment where 68K was the average deal size, bring in a deal that was 3.2 million, which changed the trajectory of that company. Now, don't you want salespeople who can do that? We're going to find out how you can get at least closer to it. Welcome to the show, Tania.
Thank you, Alice. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so Tania, Mindful Quadrant is your new company and you have a very special mission. So tell us what that mission is, what you sell, and who you sell it to.
Yeah, it's basically taking what you said and I put it into a bottle. It's helping salespeople crush their sales targets. And coming from B2B tech and being in the environment that I have been in, what I was able to learn very quickly is that salespeople need a solid discipline and a framework around how to achieve success for themselves. Sometimes we're actually in a model where we don't really see ourselves in the process because things get hard. And what I do is through my Disruptors Blueprint framework, I provide salespeople individual processes that they can actually step right into so that they can take the framework that the company is using, make it their own, and create an incredible amount of success for themselves. So of course, individuals can do this one-on-one, but it's available for teams as well.
Okay, so you are selling a framework that any salesperson can learn to improve, right? And become one of those top sellers. And individual sellers can get that on their own, even if their company doesn't support them. And you will sell it to companies for their sales teams to use this framework together to exceed. Yeah?
Absolutely. Yes. Because there has to be a better way. We all need to rise together and we all need to have a stake in the game. So this framework allows for all sides of the sales process and all people to be seen and to be able to rise to the occasion.
Yeah. And that's what we want, right? We want sellers to feel like they're empowered. They have what they need, right? To be their very best. And I think that in many cases, we don't have those frameworks in place. And you mentioned something earlier when we were chatting before the show. You said the system is not set up for everyone to win. Now, CEOs, I want you to hear that because I'm guessing you think that at your company, your salespeople are set up for success. Now, I've talked about this on my show before, right? Because I don't think we do set salespeople up for success. In the first place, sometimes we don't even hire the right people. They're not a good fit. And so right off the bat, right, they're not set up for success. But then even when we do hire really great candidates who are a good fit, we don't have the proper onboarding or the proper training or the proper coaching from leadership to help them excel. So let's stay on this for a minute. the systems are not set up for everyone to win. So what are you seeing inside of these tech organizations that makes you say that?
Yeah, I mean, my experience, number one, but number two, I will tell you the statistics say that 38.7% of salespeople in B2B tech are set up to hit or exceed their sales targets. So my question is, what about everybody else, right? And and that's where I think there's a huge opportunity for CEOs to do better, because I think that, there's always going to be the lower performers at every company, and that's, it's just sort of part of the process, and that accounts for about 17% of people. But that leaves us truly with 40 to 50% of people here in the middle who really want to do well, who want to commit to their roles, but there is no opportunity to sort of break through and be a top performer. Why? Is because they don't necessarily see themselves creating success. And so we talked a little bit about this when when we were sort of pre-calling here, but what ends up happening as a seller is you walk into an opportunity and you perform for your life and you land that job, right? And once you do, the very first question you ask of yourself and the team is, what is my account list? And how do I find myself creating a path to my number? And in that moment, Alice, you decide as a salesperson, do I have the tools and the accounts and the opportunity to knock this out of the park? Or can I find ways within the sales enablement process at that company so that I can hide long enough to just survive and maybe make it to the next year, or maybe figure out my exit plan? And that is what every seller is thinking when they say yes to a job, because there are so many salespeople out there. And we all recognize from a salesperson's perspective that we are not all going to knock it out of the park, because the statistics don't lie. The numbers are there. And so as a seller, you have to make a very calculated decision in that moment. Do I have the tools to knock it out of the park here? Or am I figuring out how to actually play this game and figure out what the optics are? And I think where sellers get lost a lot is that we get so caught up in process that we want the optics to look good, but the actual discipline, the daily discipline, and the things that we do and the things that we engage in on a day-to-day are not productive activities. They're not moving the needle with our pipeline. They're not moving the needle. Yeah.
It's not just what they're doing, it's how they're doing it that is not turning out to be productive. Like, I've seen sellers who hit all their activity metrics, but don't have the results in terms of dollars, right? They're not closing deals because activity is only one measure, right? And so we have to be really careful about that. But it's interesting because I'm thinking, if I'm a CEO, right, and I'm talking to my sales leaders, and great question to ask, are our salespeople set up to succeed from day one? What is the proof that they are set up to succeed? And so I think that if we ask that question and we don't get a very specific answer, we need to go back and figure out how we can build it so that everyone can succeed. Now, even when we build a framework, a process, an environment, a culture where we believe everyone can succeed, there will still just be some people who are not a good fit, but it shouldn't be half, right? I mean, if half of your sellers can't hit their quota, is that their fault, or is it the fault of the system? And, maybe a little of both, but why would you be hanging on to a seller who can't hit their quota? You'd either do something to help them hit it, or you would mutually decide this is not the best place for you and you should move on to some place where you can be successful. So let's give these CEOs, some real guidelines. Like, what is it? What are the things that a salesperson needs in order to be set up for success? And I'll just start with number one, a CEO who believes, right? Believes and has a vision, and who wants the sellers to succeed, and who makes sure that the sales leaders have what they need to help the sellers succeed. But let's dive in and be very specific about what sellers need to succeed.
Yeah, and I think a part of this is sellers actually need to find ways to create momentum for themselves, right? And I don't believe that today there's enough room in the system for a seller to really own that process. We are so bogged down by frameworks and enablement and process that sometimes we get so carried away checking that box that we lose sight of the bigger picture. And I think that there's some value in allowing salespeople to actually bring that magic to their craft, to be able to say, if this was my company, if this was my enterprise, how would I step out of my day to day and think about what is best for my customer? And we do actually believe that it is about the experience that we're delivering to our customers. And it is all about the buyer and the value that they get and the value exchange between the buyer and the company, and making sure that there is this beautiful mutual exchange that happens between these two parties. But then we forget about the salesperson, the one who is actually orchestrating this entire process on behalf of the company and the customer and the brand and the value and the ROI and this beautiful story that we're orchestrating. And we forget that the seller has their own personal magic that they can bring into this process and have that freedom and that autonomy to create this momentum for themselves. That is where we need to double down. Because if sellers feel like they're more invested in that process, that's where the magic comes from in that sales process. And how do I know this? Is because I have been in environments where I have had sales frameworks that have been instilled upon me. And this is the way, this is Bible, what we need to use and how we need to process the sale and how we progress. And in secret, I've sort of thought like, well, maybe this is exactly what we need to do, but how do I actually find my own personal way to shine? How do I actually create a process for myself that honors the framework that I've been given, but allows me the opportunity to be me in that process? And every single time that I have done that, Alice, has been a moment where I have created an incredible amount of momentum for myself and been able to take a deal that should be a standard deal and turned it into something that has been transformational for the companies that I have worked for. It has taken deals out of a push where we're forecasting it for Q1 of the following year, and I've been able to coin something like Team January and pull it into our fiscal, and all of a sudden have the bells at headquarters be ringing because I was able to pull the deal that actually helped us hit all of our numbers for our investors and everyone else that was counting on the number. It's because you can see yourself in that process and you have the ability to pull those reins. That's when you start to create that autonomy for the seller.
Right. So a lot of things come to mind. One is we have to believe in and support our sellers and provide an environment for them where they can thrive, which is not just process and tools, but it's people and appreciation and good feedback, good coaching, right? We have to surround them with that so that they can stay in a winning mindset, right? We have to believe they could win and they have to believe they could win. And I think another thing that comes to my mind is that process is great, right? We need process. My dad used to always say it's a lot easier to manage a process than it is to manage the people. So put good process in place and then have people adhere to the process. And I agree with that. But within that, what I think is so great about process is once you have one, everybody can be themselves inside of that process. And that's what you were doing. So it's like, here's my process and I can follow it. Now, no process is linear, even though we write them out that way, right? Or sometimes we make a little circle, but nothing happens in the order it's supposed to. It happens like this. That's how sales is. Why? Because buyers, are like that. If I have 4, 5, or 6 buyers, they're all at a different place at a different time, and they're thinking about what they need and how they need it and who they want to buy it from. It's messy, right? So if I have a process that I can follow, and then I'm told to insert myself into that process, right? And do the things that I know to do, and I can ask really better questions that go deeper, right? Then inside that process, I can be very successful. But if I'm yelled at every time I step out of that process, even though it did something good, get back in the process, right? That's not going to work. So we have to put the process in place, train the process, tell people to be themselves within it, and then trust them to actually do that, right? So that they can succeed and maybe exceed their quota versus just hitting it. But what we can't do is sit around pushing that process so much that people are not hitting their goals, right? So I think the third thing that came to my mind was then, how do we take what the best sellers are doing, right? They're following the process, but in their own way. They've added a little of this, they've added a little of that. How do we take that and help all the other sellers to have that, or even know that it's possible, right? So that they can get to the same place. So let's talk about that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the profile of sellers that I have seen knock it out of the park, right? The profile of sellers is, first profile is who you described, which is the seller who is completely comfortable in a process and so confident in what they know how to do that they can see that process for what it is, but yet they can step right into it, challenge it where they need to, manage expectations of their leadership, and still perform beautifully in that process. The other type of seller that does really well,
right? I mean, that comes out as confidence, right? So when you're interviewing people, you've got to figure out whether they are confident enough, right, to push back a little or add a new idea or ask, I'm going to do this. Is that okay? Or maybe just do it, right? So that's confidence.
It's confidence, and it's confidence in your process. I mean, if I was to give you an example, thank you for giving me a beautiful intro, but the real meat of why that was able to happen and transpire into a multi-million-dollar deal was because I had the courage to say, if we had unlimited resources and unlimited dollars, how would we solve this problem? And I asked it 6 different times to 6 different people and got completely different answers every single time. This was after multiple times of asking the question and hearing, well, we can't do it that way. And so it becomes this really important process and role that you play as a seller and a mediator to say, I've listened to you, customer, and I understand what you need. And I don't know that I have the answer for you, but I'm committed to figuring it out. And then it's taking that and packaging it with your secret sauce and delivering it to your organization to say, this is what I heard. What do you think? And that first engineer you talk to is going to say, nope.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Most sellers are not empowered, enabled, or maybe not even confident to say, I don't know if I have the solution, but I am committed to helping you figure it out, right? That's a very consultative kind of sale, right? And many sellers have so much pressure on them to hit their quota that they wouldn't dare say, I don't know if I have the solution for you, because they need that person to buy their solution, maybe whether it's the right one or not, or they're not going to hit their quota. So they're going to drive home why their solution is the right solution versus doing what you're saying, right? Now, there's a lot of, you could say good and bad in that, right? I'd say it's more bad than good, but if the salesperson hits their quota doing that, the sales leader wants them to keep doing it. The problem is those accounts become the ones that are difficult to renew, that have problems because it wasn't really a good fit in the first place, right? And we could go on and on. So when you say that, I agree with you 100%. A seller has to have the confidence and the knowledge to be able to say, I'm not 100% sure this is the solution yet, but I am committed to figuring it out. And I will go back to my company and, and come back to you, and I'll bring some subject matter experts and we'll make this happen. Right now, then when you do bring it back, maybe the company says yes, maybe they say no. We'll go into that in a second and finish your story. But I think that CEOs need to know that salespeople have to have the latitude to walk away from deals that are not good deals, and that we have to change the way, do salespeople need some competition and some encouragement and all that, but do they need tremendous pressure to close deals? No, because what you're getting is bad behaviors when you're doing that. And even though you do close some deals, they're not the ones you actually really wanted. So just, an aside there, but back to, okay, so you said that to the customer, you were brave enough to do it. Maybe you'd been in your career for a while and you knew that it wasn't exactly right yet for them, but you were committed to figuring it out. And then what happened?
So it's interesting. Well, what happened that actually impacts the client or the company is that on the client side, we were able to catapult their digital transformation and allow them to create an incredible amount of success for this multi-billion-dollar global brand. And then at the company side, we were able to actually use that deal, that win, as a way to create a framework for other deals that follow. And so it became a really anchor deal in the company and a standard for how other people should operate, frankly. And I think that's the kind of partnership that you want, is to be able to allow salespeople to have that flexibility. And by the way, I'm fanatical about customer success. I mean, everything for me is about white glove service. So after I finished closing these serial deals for this company that I worked for, I actually went back and interviewed every single one of my buyers. And I said to them, what was it about our partnership? What was it about the way that I showed up? What was it about the way that we ran this process that allowed us to get on the map with this transformational deal? And every single time I will tell you that tech buyer on the other side said to me, you had the courage to say to me that you didn't really know, but every single time you showed up with the right people who did know. And that's really what moved the needle for every single client that I worked for. And I think, to your point, Alice, what ends up happening is, as organizations, we want to create more and more rules. We want to create more and more structure. We want to create more and more places and ways that we can measure every single human and everything that they do. And in that measurement and in that microscopic way that we look at and analyze the behavior of every seller, we lose that human touch and that ability to really connect with your seller, with the person who's wearing the t-shirt that is representing your brand, right? And I think that that's really important, because that's the thing that actually moves the needle for us. That's the thing that we really need to start doubling down on, because what ends up happening as a seller is that if you don't have the autonomy to run a process that way, and you do feel like you're being micromanaged every step of the way, because we're looking at metrics and we're looking at, how we can actually improve the overall average, right? Because we have a business to run, so we need some metrics, we need some data. But what happens as a seller on the human side, I can tell you, is that you very quickly assess whether or not you have an opportunity at hitting your number in this environment. With this level of microscopic measurement, leadership, opportunity, and by the way, then I look at my account list and I say, I don't really see this happening. There is, I would argue, so much enablement that you find your little pockets of places where you can hide. Because one of the things that is the most interesting thing that leadership and sales enablement will say at a sales kickoff, or when we launch new enablement, is we will say, we know we've thrown a lot at you, but what we actually realize is that it's going to take some time for everybody to really figure out how to use all of this enablement. And that's okay. Don't feel overwhelmed. And so you say that at an organizational level. And what I hear as a seller is, it's okay for you to take your foot off the gas for a minute, because we've thrown a lot at you. And so now is your time to find that pocket where you can hide. And so in that moment, what I do is I decide, oh, I actually don't have to work as hard. Or if I'm not self-motivated, or if I don't see the path, or if I don't see a way from getting from point A to point B, I actually can opt out. And what does opt out look like? I'm okay at 70% of my number because they said it was okay. And that's what's
or
happening
you're really
with a seller.
good sellers who have exceeded at other companies can't see the path, and they will be like, I can't stay here because I need to make money, and you haven't made a clear path for me to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think too, this is where like the art and science of sales comes in, right? Yes, we have to have process. Yes, we need metrics. Of course we do, right? We want to put all that stuff in place, no doubt. But then the art is, so now in between these processes we've put in place, it's do these things. Now, the how you do them really, really matters. That's the art. And we have to learn from each other what works best, right? So in this situation, maybe this works best and that, but we have to hear from each other, and we have to hear from these successful
Yeah.
sellers that piece that is art, and how they did that, and how they fit it into the process, or how they maybe had to break the process that time in order to make it all work, right? But I think, with every company wanting these top performers, right? People who will always hit their quota or exceed it. They
Mhm.
really have to take a deep look at what's going on right now, what they're measuring, right? What people are doing, but how they're doing it, and start to deeper dive into that and enable people on the how so they have
Yeah.
more and better ways, right?
Yes, and it's not about another call script, and it's not about another piece of the tech stack, because I can tell you, I have been stuck many times in my career as a salesperson. And one prime example is there was a point in time in my career where I had just finished closing one of the largest deals in the history of the company, and I was on stage with my customer at sales kickoff. And 2 months into the next fiscal, I couldn't find my footing. I couldn't figure out a way to generate pipeline. I couldn't find a way to create opportunity for myself. And yeah, that's another moment of pause, right? Where you say, okay, well, I have a little bit of time. I just came out as a top performer. I was celebrated. And so maybe everybody was sort of back off for a minute. But things get real very quickly. And so I was doing
Well, and
all of
most
the
good
things,
sellers have a even bigger quota the next year, right? Like,
an even bigger quota.
congratulations, you exceeded your quota. Now your quota is even bigger, right? So you're like, whoa.
Right, because we believe in you. You got this. Well, but we could give other people a shot too, right? If we created that right environment where we actually built the framework so that everybody has a shot, then other people have a chance to win also, and it doesn't create unnecessary pressure for that top performer, because we can all play this game. We're all good. So in this particular situation, what I ended up doing, and I'm pretty good about self reflection, right? And so this really worked well for me, which is why I packaged this into my framework. But I found myself in this very uh, repeatable pattern where I would go into my one-on-one with my leader, and he would say, "Well, how is your pipeline looking? And how's it looking with ABC top target accounts?" And I would say, "Well, no progress yet, but we're doing everything that we can. I'm going top down, and my BDR or my SDR is going bottoms up, and we have call scripts, and we created all of the marketing, and we have a 1-2 approach, and we're doing all the things." And then the next week would come, and I was telling the same story because I was doing all those things, Alice, but they weren't producing the result that I needed. And so 3 weeks into the process, I actually called myself out on my own BS. And I said, okay, you need to make this work. You're coming out of last fiscal as a hero, and you're really struggling right now. What do you need to do to turn this ship around? And so I sat down and had a very open and honest conversation with me, myself, and I. And what I decided is that potentially there was a little bit of fear mixed into all of this, right? Like the fear of, if I actually had, back to my old example, unlimited money, unlimited resources, unlimited fear, because we have to ask those questions of ourselves too. But if I had unlimited ability to do the thing, what would I do in this moment in time to turn my pipeline around? And in that moment, the answer that came to me was, I actually need to get in touch with the president of a multi-billion-dollar global beauty brand. And so I decided that she was going to be my mission, getting a meeting with this particular woman. And all of a sudden, Alice, the activities that I engaged in changed dramatically, because now we're not going top down and bottoms up and giving cute little updates and making up next steps in our CRM, right? But we are actually fanatically obsessed with figuring out what makes this woman tick. What is it about her business that she wants to change? What is it about the digital transformation that I can impact? What is the overlap of that story, and how can I help? And that turned into multiple days of an incredible amount of research, and then an email that was literally 3 sentences, and the part of my framework and process that I love to use, which is more of the discover process, right? The discover is like, okay, now that I'm all fired up, discover is like, how can I discover what resources I have at my company that I can utilize, what people I know that I can utilize, what events are happening that I can use to really fuel my story. And in that particular case, it happened to be that marketing was running this really incredible event that was focused on top level executives. And I was able to marry those two things together, invite her to this incredibly high touch event. And I remember, Alice, like sitting in my one-on-one with my manager on a Zoom, raising my hand saying, I have the president of a large multi-billion-dollar global beauty brand coming to this event. And I think my story of I'm trying, we're going top down, bottoms up, the whole thing, it was just getting so old that he actually looked at me and was like, cool, that's good, that's great. And just completely wasn't even listening, right, to my superhuman thing that I was able to do. And the next day after the event, in our one-on-one or team call, he said, do you know who was there? It was the president of the company. And I said, I've been trying to tell you that. I got a meeting with the president of the company. And so my point in telling this story is that when you ignite something in the seller that actually allows for that creativity, anything is possible. Because we did end up getting that meeting. That president did actually defer us to her team that was able to do the work. And, you get all kinds of challenges then. This is where you need your process, because we walked into that meeting and now you have 6 people who are looking at you like, how are you going to complicate my day and my life because the president said I have to talk to you, right? So that's when you kind of go back to your sales process and the discipline and all the things that you need to do to qualify a deal and show value and do all of the right things. But within 6 months, we had closed a deal with this brand, and it again became one of the anchor brands in our portfolio. And that's how you do it.
Yeah. Wow. So everyone listening wishes they had a bunch of salespeople like you, right? A sales team full of Tanias, for sure. So, all right, as we wrap up here, how should a sales leader get started? Like, what's the actually, let's go back to CEO and sales leader, but a CEO who's listening to this is saying, yeah, I really want to do this in my organization. What's the first question I need to ask the people around me so that we can start moving in this direction of supporting salespeople, enabling salespeople, and really taking a strong look at what might be holding them back from being top performers, right? So what would you say would be the first questions or the first steps?
I think it's about objectivity. I think it's about being able to ask those questions and then being open about what answers you get back. And I think it's about asking the leadership team and the enablement team. But I think it's also about asking the sales team and the people who are out there actually doing the work, because the numbers don't lie. And I do think that there's always opportunity to get better. I was on the phone with a CRO yesterday who just said, I can't give my team another thing. They just want to go sell. I can't give them another piece of enablement because they just don't want it. They just want to go do their job. And I think that there's a beauty in actually listening to the feedback that you get and saying, is there an opportunity to change this game? Because more enablement, better call scripts, different call scripts, it's not going to change the game.
No.
What will change the game is actually shifting the emphasis from sales enablement to actually thinking about the seller and the human and the seller enablement of this, to be able to really start to create some equal buckets around the company and the customer, the buyer, and that mutual exchange, and really shining a light on the mutual exchange between the salesperson, the person responsible for bringing in revenue to your company, and the companies that you work for. What does that mutual exchange look like? And that's where we need to shine a little bit more of a light.
Well, and the last thing I'm going to say about that, because I just love it all, right? But it's, you asked your customer a question. I think CEOs should ask their sales team, the sellers. If you had unlimited resources, unlimited money, unlimited time, what would you do to get customers, right, to buy from us, to close more deals? Like, what would it be? Because some of what they say will be doable. Some of it won't, but it just might get everybody to talk about things in a different way. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I have 3 questions for you before we part ways. And I'll also, of course, let you tell everybody how to get a hold of you. But the first question is, what is a book that you think every CEO should read?
Yeah, so I love, I used to think that it was an issue for me that I really just like self-help books. I really do. I like to find ways like, how can I get better? How can I get a competitive edge? And so my bookshelf and my nightstand is full of books like that. So to narrow it down to one, and especially some of the traditional ones, I think is a little bit predictable. I will say the next one on my list that I'm going to read that I haven't read yet, but I'm so fascinated by is Unreasonable Hospitality. And the reason I suggest that book, it is because it's actually in the hospitality industry, and it is about the story of 11 Madison Park and how that owner was able to transform this restaurant into an experience that is such a coveted experience. I think it goes back to what we were talking about, Alice, which is all about exceeding customer expectations,
Mhm.
exceeding the expectation that anyone has of you, and not just on the buyer side. This is why I'm intrigued. This is, he didn't just take that into effect to say, I actually want to bring in sand from the beach and create, mocktails and Mai Tais in my restaurant for you because you skipped your vacation. This is also then going back to the kitchen staff and saying, every interaction I have with you, I have to make sure is grounded in integrity, and that there's a mutual benefit that you understand we're exchanging here when I give you feedback. And so it does a beautiful job of reflecting that light across all parts of the experience. And I think we all have something to learn from that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. And I think every CEO can learn from that. Another one on that same vein is The Experience Mindset by Tiffany Bova. Because
Mm,
she says everybody's talking about customer experience, but you can't have great customer experience unless you have great employee experience. So
mhm.
definitely two very, very good ones. All right. What's a podcast you love because it makes you think differently?
Okay, so this is another non-traditional one because I love being a little bit different. I actually think that we have too many inputs. And again, with my podcasts, I love a good podcast because I am an enthusiast of all things health, fitness, financial abundance, right? How to improve my sales game, all of the things. And so I consume a lot of things that serve me in the moment. But what I think could benefit every CEO, and what is a valuable part of my practice is truly taking 5 minutes every day to listen to a meditation podcast where you just think about nothing else but yourself. And in those moments are really the moments where I actually give myself the permission to think a little bit differently. And it's when all of the noise starts to go away so that I'm not responding to things and I'm not reacting to things, but I'm closing my eyes and I'm saying, if I was listening, where do I feel like I could be better? Where do I feel like I could lean into to create a better experience for people? And so I know we talk so much and it's so commercialized when we talk about, oh, we have to journal and meditate and do all the things. And I was one of these people, I didn't have time for that stuff. I'm busy in the hustle, girl. Like, I don't have time for this stuff. But it's really only recently where I really leaned into that stuff is I realized that it doesn't take much time, but it opens up so much creativity that serves you and serves others, and that's where we all need to be.
Do you have an app or a podcast that you recommend?
So I don't have a lot of time in the day, but you know what I'm obsessed with now is I actually bought a headband on Amazon for $10, and it's a sleep headband with Bluetooth. And I end up actually listening to a podcast called Sleep Magic. And so it allows you to sort of fall asleep to this meditation. But I love it because there's a range of topics, right? It's how do I tap into my greatness? It's how do I let go? How do I control my anger? How do I think about being a better human? How do I lead with gratitude? There's a menu of different things, and I think each one of those things just softens and opens up a new side of you. And so I'm currently just obsessed with that one.
Wonderful. Okay, and last question. What does every CEO need to know to win in this marketplace?
My my default answer, because I feel so strongly about this, is that we can't forget the human side of the business. And I think that that's the most important. And I think that right now we are a little bit off balance where we have overemphasized on the buyer, the output, the product, the result, the customer success story, the ROI, all the things that come after the sale.
Yeah.
And we've forgotten the simplicity and the beauty of what it used to be like to sell. It used to be a trade. You have something I want, I have something you need. How about we swap?
Yeah.
Right? And so as we've added technologies and people and process and enablement and all the things, we've just lost track of the basics and the things that actually make this economy move and create impact. And so that would be my advice, is doubling down on the people and really just creating more harmony and balance across the ecosystem. That's all I ever hope for.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Really enjoyed it. And I think all the CEOs listening are going to get a lot of ideas. How can people find you and Mindful Quadrant?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I love LinkedIn, so I'm on LinkedIn, Tania Doub. Follow, connect. I'm sharing always my ideas on how to empower motivated sellers and teams. My website is mindfulquadrant.com. There is actually a ton of information there around my newest course. When you said earlier, Alice, how do you bottle it up and get more Tanias, right? The blueprint that I have developed around the disruptors quadrant is truly the way to bring this magic to your teams. It is a process that I go through where I help sellers think about a framework: discover, decide, design, and disrupt. It's about internal self-discovery. It's about the decision to be great. It's about the disruption of creating an epic amount of momentum for yourself. And it is about really looking within to say, how can I use the resources around me to be great? And I have bottled that into a 12-week course. It's a workshop for teams. But that is something that I welcome CEOs to take a look at because it's transformational for sales teams.
Yeah, wonderful. So if you do reach out to Tania on LinkedIn, please make sure you let her know that you heard her here on Sales Talk for CEOs. Or if you reach out to her for her services, please do the same. Thanks again for being with us. It was a pleasure. And I'll look forward to keeping up with how things are going at Mindful Quadrant.
Thanks, Alice. I appreciate the time. It was fun.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.